Hello, in this lesson we're going to be talking about two things in particular. The first concept that we're going to talk about is called arrays. And arrays are something that we can take and create a list of data. The next thing that we're going to be looking at are going to be a little bit about recursion, and that's about functions. Now, let's start off with arrays. And what we're going to do is an array is a list, very similar to how we have this list here. We have a list of numbers or a list of integers. So here we have a 5, 8, 7, 2, and 1. Now, programmers always count from the number 0. So this would be the 0th index, 1, 2, 3, 4. Even though there's 5 elements here. So the length would still be 5, but we would need to reference these as if this was 0 and this one is 4. So if we reference 5, what we do is we get an error, and that error is going to be an index out of bounds error. Your arrays can be a different size, does not matter. So in this particular example, I'm going to keep on making everything 5. But if you want to make them larger or smaller, go for it, and I'll show you how to do that. So the very first thing is we need to tell what type of array it is. This is the exact same thing as we've been doing for normal variables. It could be an integer, a double, it doesn't really matter. So we pick the variable type. I'm going to be using integers. So the way we tell it's going to be an array is we use these two brackets, an open and closed bracket. That says this is going to be an array of integers. We're going to name this dice rolls. And we are going to then need to initialize the array. Basically, we're telling it how many integers are going to be in it. So we write this new int here, and then in here we put the size. So in this example, that's 5, 50, 5. Whatever you want them to be. I want to be it at 5. So we have dice rolls here. Now, when you create your array, they're going to initialize it all to whatever its default is. So if you're using primitives, usually it's a 0 or false. But if you're using like an array of strings, then you'll need to initialize each one. But let's say I have this, but I'm like, oh, I want to add another one. Well, if I do that, I'm going to erase all the other pieces of information. So to think about this, please make sure that you create your array with the size that you want it to be, or the maximum in mind, not the minimum or the average. So this only holds 5 until I have to make a brand new one, and if I save it, it will replace it. So do know that. So that is how we create an array, and I want to use recursion to fill this array. I know there is something called loops out there. We will get to it. But for now, I would like you to use recursion in order for this to work. Now, you've done recursion in your math classes, especially if you've taken Algebra 2, recursive sequences, the number counting from like 1, 5, 9, you're adding 4 to each one. So those type of functions are there. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a void here, and we're going to have set dice. And I'm going to have an int called die number. Or die num. So there's a couple things I want to illustrate with this. First, if I do this if statement with die num, and I do make sure that it's less than the amount of dice I have. Now, I could just put 5 here, but I want to be able to change this as I go. So let's, for example, I say, oh, I no longer want 5, I want 10 dice. Well, I would have to go find every place where I check to see how many there are. And I would have to change that in every piece of location. If I forget one, it might break. So it's just easier for us to call dice rolls.length. This way, we're not really concerned about the length. We just know that there's a length there. So we're going to make sure that dice num is less than length. And what we're going to do is we're going to roll the dice. Now, this is pretty much from the previous one. We have this roll dice method down here that generates random dice. So I'm going to store that into one of the arrays. So I'm going to dice rolls. And the way we're going to store data into an array is we do the brackets again but then this time we put the index value. So this 0 would restore it into this slot here. I am going to use a variable here, dice num, and whatever this value is, as long as it's less than the length, we're good to go. And that's okay because that's 5. Oh, 4 and 0. As long as it's not negative number, it's going to be okay. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to say roll dice. And we're going to roll a 6-sided die. Cool. Then we want to move on to the next one. So we're going to do set dice, and we're going to do die num plus 1. And it will do it again, but this time it's going to, if dice num was 0 the first time, it's going to be 1, and we're going to do it again, and again, and again, and again. And this creates a kind of a loop that goes around using recursion, which is pretty cool. So we're going to do set dice, and I'm going to set it to 0 here. I'm also going to create another one called print dice. So this way I can I can print them out. And I'm just going to print them down here in the console. So I'm going to have print dice int die num again. And this is pretty much the exact same method here. So I'm going to do die num is less than dice rolls dot length. And I'm going to, instead of having it set, I'm going to do system.out.println, so it's all on its own line. And I'm going to do dice rolls die num. This is the exact same way that we're going to, this is how you read the variable. And then we're going to do print dice. And then I'm going to do die num plus 1. Perfect. Now, if I run this, oh, let me print the dice. Print dice starting at 0. I'm going to run this. And of course, this is the first time I'm running today, so it's going to go a little slow. And I should have some things down here. So I have 5 dice that was rolled 2, 4, 4, 4, and 5. Every single time I run this program, it will be different, which is really neat. So let's do some other things. Let's see if we want to sum things up. Now this uses recursion to sum up some values. So we're going to do public int, and then we're going to go in here and type in the words sum dice. And I'm going to do int die num the exact same way. So we're going to do here if die num is less than dice rolls. So this way we have a limit here. If we don't have a limit, we'll most likely get a array out of bounds error. And by default, I'm going to return 0 because remember I have to return an integer. So I'm going to, by default, if I run out of space, I'm just going to return 0. If I have more space, I want to return the dice rolls, and I want to the dice rolls die num, plus I want to do the I want to see whatever the next dice is. So I'm going to do sum dice die num plus 1. So if I do this, I'm going to print this one out on my starting screen here. So I'm going to do plus, and I'm going to do sum dice starting at 0. And I'm going to take the average as well. The average is going to be the sum dice 0 divided by the size. So that was going to be dice rolls.length. Now, remember we had to put the parentheses in here to force order of operation. Actually, we didn't really need to do it here because we're doing division, and division is better than addition. So that's okay. So let's take a look at running this. So I have a sum of 20 and the average of 4. That average works out perfect, but let's check these out. 5 plus 5 is 10, plus 2 plus 2 plus 6. That's 20. Perfect. So if I run this one more time, you should be able to see that. So 16, 3, 3, 6, 10, 14, 16, average 3. Now, notice we're doing integer division, and we've talked about that before. So just being a heads up, this is integer division, so you will never get decimals. So good luck. Add these to your programs, and happy programming. Bye-bye.